You're a treasure hunter,
Yes.
and your spirits are treasure hunters,
Yes.
and you do be finding things.
Very true.
Anyone who hangs out with you in real life knows that you do be finding things.
Yes.
Have you ever found something genuinely cool in one of the little libraries that people set up around neighborhoods?
Ooh.
The places where it's like, in theory, you're like, great, I can donate a book or two and take one, for the children
Yeah.
or for the community. And instead, it's like the worst books you've ever seen in your life are there.
Yeah. I ran a pretty solid grift using these little libraries, which is I would send out the sniffer dogs, as it were, of the treasure hunting spheres and get them to tell me where one-time used textbooks were at the end of semesters. And I would gather them and
Upsell them?
upsell.
Yeah.
So I made a decent little chunk of change when I was in school and got a couple of the textbooks that I still have.
Nice. Okay, word.
Shout out to Raven Biology of Plants for doing that.
Okay, nice. Yeah. I have probably the most interesting thing I found in one of those was a Blu-ray copy of Hereditary, the Ari Aster movie, which had a code in it that was unused for some reason to get like a digital copy, and then a bunch of Anna Riva booklets in the same one, mind you.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But most of my book hunting has come to PDFs and finding things in used bookstores. So like I got all my like Stephen Skinner Golden Hole Press, textbooks of art, as it were, came from the exact same used bookstore, which I take you to pretty regularly to pet its cat.
Yes.
Yeah.
A very sweet man.
Yeah, and most of my Three Hands Press collection is in there too. Back when, I would actually pretty much get anything that was coming out.
Yeah, a lot of my grimoire collection was acquired in the same way from a half-price books. Someone sold off a collection and I snatched it up.
Totally, yeah. Well, speaking of a collection of manuscripts that you may come across in a moment of need, today we're talking about the Boxgrove Manual, one of two grimoires published in Frank Klaassen's Making Magic in Elizabethan England. One being, of course, the Antiphonor Notebook, and the other being the Boxgrove Manual. And today we're gonna, frankly, stick with the more interesting of the two.
The more illustrated, the more beautiful.
Yeah. So strap your boots on and get your treasure hunting hats on, because this was found in a very similar way.
Beautiful. Be not alarmed at the fretful howls which you may hear. It's Sfinga.
Yo.
And breaking the final seal to usher in the Apocalyptic Christ key.
It's like my favorite pentacle. Like, hands down, without a doubt. There are others that are more effective, as they say.
Yeah.
There are others that do things that are actually, directly illustrated within the book. But this is my favorite. I'm sticking to it.
There are many pentacles like it, but this one is mine.
This one is mine. It's absolutely true. And you know what? That is exactly how it should be. I will say, though, I made a joke just now about how, usefulness is useful. Okay, if you know how to talk to it, if you know how to speak into it, if you know exactly what you're doing with it, if you've called it spirits and spoken to your favorite apocalyptic beings of choice, they will teach you wonders and wonders and mysteries and mysteries. So have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But seriously, it's great. But before we get into that, remember to check us out at patreon.com/the Frightful Howls. We have a bonus episode every month curated by and just for our patrons. Come to, a Q&A essentially, and we've come to refer to it as Frightful Howls After Dark because it's not edited and it's very,
It gets raunchy.
it gets raunchy, it gets rowdy, it gets silly.
Mhm.
We post. We post into the ether and the ether posts back at us.
We post at the postman for posts.
Yeah, exactly. We also have a Discord server where you can post your own comedic memes, your insights. People are organizing fun little things in there, scrying challenges, scrying practice, divination practice, as well as like group rosaries and all kinds of things. So definitely check it out. We have a monthly live occult book club where we discuss a text of your choosing. People are asking us to stuff the ballots in favor of Battle of Fate. It's the Korean reality TV show. Uh, the more you vote, the more we can stuff the ballot. But I'm not manipulating it. That's up to
Yep.
you which is to do. We got show notes for every episode and a whole tier of monthly group spell work from us on your behalf.
Also, remember to give us a like, a rating, and a review on Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you might be listening to us. Shout out to the Stitcher heads listening.
Yeah.
And
Shouts to Pod Bay.
but each of these, thumbs up is the apotropaic gesture that helps us fight the demiurge of the algorithm.
Absolutely. And check out our services. Key offers personalized coaching in magic and mediumship and Lenormand. If you would like to get some good old-fashioned Lenormand lessons from him, he'll teach you. Sorcery for hire, readings, and custom talismans/oils/tools. I offer bulk and fancy readings, and both of us offer occasional limited occult wares over on with cunningandcommand.com.
And lastly, be sure to hit us up on social media. Come talk. Sfinga is at Dragon Cunning, and I am at barnell.key.
Hell yeah.
So who up Boxing Day Grove?
Oh my god, I am. Apparently I've been because it's such a fascinating text and the origin story is so interesting. So Frank Klaassen, very noted scholar of early modern grimoire history, as well as different kinds of, especially magic in the Elizabethan period. He published this lovely book. It's been out for some time, making magic in Elizabethan England. And when I first got my hands on it, I was, of course, give it a little flip through, and I was just stunned by the symbols and seals, specifically within the Boxgrove manual section. It's interesting, right? These are two anonymous manuscripts. Again, I mentioned before, one is the Antiphoner notebook and the other is the Boxgrove manual. Both dated to the Elizabethan English period, and they're part of a larger culture, really intellectual culture, about the practice of magic in the early modern period. The introduction is definitely worth reading. I highly recommend folks to get their hands on this book from Penn State University Press and really just have a look at some of the conclusions that Klaassen is drawing on the Renaissance, the Reformation, brand new developments in science, the printing press, all the different kinds of like religious as well as economic tensions that are creating this new sort of explosion of interest in magic that is becoming more and more in some ways democratized. Not quite to the extent as we'll see with more like paperback printed grimoires in the Bibliothèque Bleue period, but we're definitely heading in a direction of that's at least somewhat similar. It's interesting too because the Antiphoner notebook is very much about treasure hunting. It's got lots of oral charms, it's got lots of fun things to do. And there's some drawing on Reginald Scott's discovery of witchcraft. The Boxgrove manual is definitely written by somebody who's a fan of Agrippa. It's drawing heavily from the first two books of his cult philosophy, as well as the alleged fourth. And it's very clear that the author of the Boxgrove Manual is fairly convinced that the fourth book of occult philosophy is indeed Agrippa's work. And it's interesting, right? This is a post-Reformation work. You can see how an occultist of this time period is basically being able to handle the Reformation, right? So Klaassen notes that, it's sometime in the late 16th century, a Protestant parish priest of Boxgrove in Sussex named Owen Lording commissioned a scribe to produce a copy of this manuscript. And this scribe produced an artless manuscript in which the ink bled through the paper. And Lording may have been very unhappy with this product, and conflict over whether he should pay for the manuscript arose, which might explain some of the, the officious notes affixed to the first folio, he says. And so the original doesn't survive, and the author is unknown. But the author clearly had the 1570 edition of Agrippa's occult philosophy, so it was more than likely written in the last decades of the century. It was also probably originally written in English. There's no evidence that it was translated. It is unlikely that the priest commissioned would have had the resources to engage a translator. So he, surmises that the original author was probably not the scribe, and he drew on various sources of typical of 16th century manuscripts. So that doesn't just include, Renaissance magic as we know it, but also medieval magic at its sources. So here, there's this desire to create this coherent practice, right? This coherent understanding of like a system of magic. And he, Klaassen makes a really good point within his introduction to the Boxgrove manual, which is this is really a kind of microcosm of the world of learned magic in Elizabethan England. You have somebody who was very aware of medieval learned magic. Using the new materials available in print. And this was not just a reinterpretation of Agrippa, who, of course, is the most influential of the Renaissance magi, as he calls them. This is also somebody who was very aware of older traditions and employed them as a basis for these rituals. So he reads Agrippa's work, his textbook, along with the Historia Spiritum and the Liber Consecrationum, as well as the fourth book of occult philosophy, the Heptameron, pseudonymously attributed to Peter of Abano. And he puts them all together in this very interested two layers of magic that Klaassen describes. The first is the lamens, or the amulets. It's the first 10 folios. These are all about the planetary spirits, both good and bad, for various purposes, and includes, procuring love, currying the favor of superiors, gaining material wealth, your usual juju, right? This is the kind of stuff that people be doing juju for. And what's interesting too is that there's lots and lots of lists of materials. We consider the metals, we consider the ideal times, we consider specific astrological timings that would be best for engraving them, and so on. It's more complex than some of the other forms of astrological magic that were circulating Europe, but it's also similar in principles in many ways, as Klaassen notes. We have, numbers and symbols and words that kind of connect these powers together. And of course, there's this interesting, parallel here to the first two books, right, of the occult philosophy, elemental magic and celestial magic. And here, both of them are in full display in the creation of these lamens.
Mhm.
And then furthermore, right, you also have, the author of the Boxgrove manual, as Klaassen says, is clear that these lamens, yes, they can be used for the invocation of spirits. This is anticipated because there's lengthy descriptions in the first section of how the spirits look when they manifest themselves. But he only actually gives you the invocations in the remaining 27 folios. So there's instructions on making pentacles or lamens to call the spirits, which are different from the first set, which we'll talk about in a bit. And there's sample images and how to customize them. And then there's a lot of different information. There's spirit names, there's sample circles, there's lists of divine names. There's a really cool section that we'll talk about later where it's customized based on the day of the week and the season that you're in.
Mhm.
And then you also have like how to consecrate the equipment in conjurations. There's fumigations, right? Like the incense, the water, the oil, the fire, the magic books, like how to create like a liber spiritus,
Mhm.
how to create like a liber of your own, first you're just keeping your spirit names in there, keeping your pacts in there, I love a good thesaurus spiritum. Like it's something that I'm really fascinated by, especially as somebody really into Cyprian magic, right? Like I really think of the notion of the book and the
Mhm.
book that contains the pacts, whether it's invisible or visible. And then the third of the, a huge third of the volume really is just prayers for consecration. And the prayers are long and they're really cool. We'll go over some of them, but it's, I personally just love them. Like when I heard them for the first time, I was like, this is great. And then the final pages of the book are a set of magic figures for invoking spirits.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's also interesting because it's a full system, right? So the lamens and other equipment can only be made at specific times, not just the times of the week, but also planetary hours and specific moments where different planets and the moon are in different signs. So there's waiting, right? You can't just do this all in one night. You have to kind of take your time to make things. My, grimoire of choice is the Tuba Veneris, the little black book of Venus, and it's you have to wait for a new moon Friday and pretty much do everything then, and then you dig it up the next day on the Saturday.
Right.
So it takes time to make these things, and I know very well art of being patient for a particular moment like that. But this book, it's its own system. Like you could work this as your grimoire of choice, and have a lot of fun with it, really. So Klaassen says, like, most crucially, one might have to wait up to 2 weeks for waxing moon, and I was like, that's not terrible.
Yeah.
But you can also just, your usual things. You can purchase certain things in certain hours and days. I always think about like how much can we stretch that? Like, is it like the horn in Tuba Benares? And I swear we will have a Tuba Benares episode one day. But the horn, is supposed to be cut off a live bull in Tuba Benares. That's really awful, and frankly, no one does that anymore. And so, do you buy a bull skull in the Venus hour on a Venus day? Do you, move the money from your bank account into your wallet or whatever, your PayPal? At the same time, do you saw it off the enlivened skull that you do a bunch of prayers to kind of revive the spirit briefly, on the same day and hour on a future time? Who knows, right? It depends. In my case, somebody got it for me and was like, I'm gonna saw it off this bull at the right time and place, and like the it's one of those things too. It's just like, yeah, it was a skull, right? Like it was literally like an actual like skull, but at the same time, like it was enlivened, right? And
Yeah.
that kind of thing. So it's you figure it out. You figure out what you can do, but really with this, I've always felt this way about this kind of work is you show the spirits you mean business by going out of your way to do these things by being and for a book like this, the Boxgrove Manual, which pays such attention to these timings, I would consider that even the act of like, moving your money around in the hour and day, or making sure that like you're making certain purchases in the hour and day. Like it's one thing to buy something from a blacksmith in an hour and day and then buy a bunch of other items with it so you don't haggle, so you don't realize the cost at the same time period. That's one thing. Like sometimes spirits will ask for that. Like don't haggle the price and don't even look at the price. So you pick the item off and then get a bunch of other things so that you don't notice how much it'll cost, individually, only the total. But you do it in an hour and day and it actually like adds something to it because they're noticing the timing is something that you're considering.
I think that's one of the really important things for people who are developing their own systems of magic in the same way, or really, riffing on and innovating upon different source texts, this one included, to create your own sort of pentacles and diagrams and any, as any Agrippa enjoyer will know, um, as much as the author of this text, attention to detail is important,
Mm,
especially when you don't necessarily know what will happen. You don't know if the thing is going to work from the beginning. So controlling as many variables and actually thinking through those questions of practicality that might arise, saying like, okay, what is, like Sfinga was saying, what are the timings for these things, but what are the variables that we need to be controlling?
yeah, totally. And of course, you have equipment that you sprinkle with holy water and with no additional instructions. Then you also have ascetic practices, right? Just fasting or sexual abstinence that is asked for. There's being properly groomed, wearing clean and sweet smelling clothing, and so on and so forth, right? All of this takes place before a single word of conjuration is uttered, as Klaassen says. So it's good to know that, that kind of preparation of the mage's body is also incredibly important in this work. And it's interesting too because there's a notion of atmosphere here as well.
Mhm.
Clausen says, if cloudy or disturbed atmospheric conditions prevailed or arose at all, the operation will have to be abandoned for the next propitious time. And he makes a comment saying, this is, could you imagine how notoriously difficult this would be for British weather conditions, right?
Yeah.
So this, if you live in a much, better climate, you might think like, okay, that's not so bad. But this is not an easy thing to line up necessarily. So there's also, of course, the notion of secrecy. The text stresses secrecy at any point that the operations, anything about it should not be revealed to anyone but those worthy of sharing the secret. So these people, like a little coven essentially of magicians, a little guild, could help prepare the clothing and equipment and the site of conjuring, but they too also have to have good character and they have to prepare themselves in a similar manner. They have to have engaged in a similar ascetic practices. And the actual conjuration of drawing the circle with consecrated chalk between 9 and 17 feet in diameter. And then each conjuration would be said 28 times, 7 times in each cardinal direction. And while the text is not specific, Klaassen says we can assume this applies to each stage of the operation. So that's a lot of prayer.
Yeah.
And one thing that's good about a lot of prayer is it exhausts you, it puts you into trance, it dulls the monkey mind, like the busy chattering mind that is analyzing everything and looking for little changes. And eventually you reach a flow of personal spiritual purification through the prayer, as well as just the kind of fatigue and the lull of the trance that it helps you see spirits more easily.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is just more and more conducive, just even from just scrying by candlelight with a ton of incense going to lining everything up in certain hours and days that will make it easier for the spirit to manifest without having to struggle as much. This too puts you in that state, so you're meeting in the middle. The spirit is supposed to able to physically manifest more easily because of these conditions, but you're also able to see them more easily
Yeah.
because of the same conditions. So they don't. It's meeting them in the middle is probably the best we can hope for in these situations.
Yeah. That was one of the main things of some chaos magic circles that I was running with, were really innovating on grimoires and text from the same period. The metaphor that we always use is tuning the radio.
Mm,
And, a spirit is, I'm speaking more abstractly here, but you could read this literally. A spirit is something of a frequency,
mm,
and we never know how strong that frequency is going to be, and we never know quite where that frequency originates.
mhm,
So we have to, build a better and better antenna and have
mhm.
better and better radio equipment.
Yeah, I mean, the author of the Boxgrove manual literally says, "If you don't get a result, do it again.
Yeah.
Like, try it again," and says that sometimes this can take months. So, an earnest and dedicated magician is not gonna give up if the spirit doesn't show up the first time, and they won't fake it. They won't be like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I totally heard something and saw something." Like, if you didn't, you didn't.
Yeah.
The spirit didn't show up in some visible form when you've adjured them to arise visibly, speak intelligibly, take a pleasing form, and so on. Your usual speak without lying, and so on and so forth. Do it again and show that dedication. Like I've spoken to some different ritual magic folks that I really trust and whose practice I really admire, who've been like, in their opinion, like that original spirit that quote didn't show up the first time, it was watching and it was seeing like, am I going to tire them out or are they going to come back? And eventually, they won that spirit's respect on some level and also compelled them, frankly, to come by ringing that doorbell too many times,
Mhm.
right? They showed up eventually.
Yeah. Like, I shout outs to the author of this manual
Mhm.
for having that ethos of actually being an effective magician.
Yeah.
Like the amount of times that I would go to the store and buy packs of note cards, like index cards, and do pentacles on the blank backside of them and then write out the prayer on the line side, just to try to make my own that would actually function out of like geometric figures, just following the Agrippa instructions like to the letter.
Mm.
I have burnt ritually and scattered to the winds more packs of those cards because they didn't fucking work that I would count. But I still have like the 10 that did,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
use those for different things. So,
Totally, totally. Well, it's also there's some sociological analysis that Klaassen engages, and he talks about this as kind of like a brotherhood of male compatriots. There's this notion of the vernacular. Yes, he says because of the vernacularization process, it's true that female practitioners were also employing aspects of learned magical traditions, but it's clear that this is meant to be for men. It's not inherently against women, but this is clearly like a male heavy text. And also what's interesting too is there's a whole thing here about the relationship between the system of the natural world and the person doing the operation, right? So the lower levels of Agrippa system, which is to say, he says natural and celestial magic, yes, could be used independently, but Agrippa himself warns against this. So in here, with the lamans in the first sections, they could be employed in ways that don't actually really involve summoning spirits. And of course, the structures in the natural world are conceived of as physical manifestations of higher spiritual realities, right? So the planetary spirits are connected ontologically to the physical planets. But, as in the case of Agrippa, the Boxgrove manual, he says, is clearly setting up these lower levels of magic as supports for the higher. There's a very Platonic kind of worldview here. And so, one thing that I found really interesting as well, and that Klaassen really highlights, is that there's a desire to create a Christian magic here, like an explicitly Christian magic. The author of the Boxgrove manual is definitely following the fourth book of occult philosophy and creating this image that lacks some of the kind of notion of celestial natural elements is the most powerful, and instead going towards very Christian images. So the actual instructions for the Laman involving the apocalyptic Christ that we talked about, it's a tiny portion of the text, but it is the opening page of the volume, right? Of the folio. So it suggests on some level the scribe or maybe even the author saw it as in some ways definitive. This is an image that is incredibly important.
Yep. It is the apocalypse of democratized magic.
That's funny. Yeah, it's also just interesting too because yeah, this system is an integration, right, of natural and celestial elements into this Christian framework, which is you're looking for the numinous, you're looking for this experience of God, and God is the author and whose substance upholds this natural and celestial world. I think a lot about the Christian astrology tradition,
Yeah.
right? Not beyond Lilly himself, but this is really about the like, incredible importance of course, the sky is intelligible, God is intelligent, and created an intelligible world. And
Right.
if you are someone who's going to be dedicating your knowledge and your intellect to learning the most, important sciences such as theology and astrology and so on, as in the tradition of, in many ways, Aristotle, right? It's of course, there are going to be signs that are left by God for those who have the mind to see with. And it's going to be located, of course, in the very planets that he intentionally ordered. It's interesting here too. Klaassen, there's one thing I want to talk about in the literature before we get into the text proper, which is Klaassen says like, okay, this kind of magic is clearly about the experience. You're looking to all of it is for a goal of summoning a spirit and experiencing that spirit. And so he asks like, wouldn't all these practitioners pretty disappointed when it didn't work? Like he says, like, I mean, yes, it's true that you might have a subjectively convincing experience of conjuring a spirit. And maybe it's the fasting, maybe it's the prayers, maybe it's these things that, help you enter your whatever theta wave brain states and, have these hypnagogic experiences. And he makes some points about how, yes, there's no direct study of the neuropsychological effects of pre-modern magic. We do know that sexual abstinence and fasting and repetitive prayer and such can bring about certain auditory and visual experiences. And he cites one of my favorite scholars, Tanya Lerman, who's done a lot of work on how it is she's worked on Wiccan communities, pagan communities, Christian communities. She looks at like how do people make and experience gods and spirits. She's a fantastic anthropologist. I highly recommend her work always. But basically, like Klaassen as a scholar, is just saying like, well, obviously none of this stuff worked. Like, you're going through all this trouble and nothing's going to show up. And I think this is where I understand the impulse of scholarship to just say that flatly, but I think it forgets the phenomenological approach, which is someone's having a human experience.
Yeah.
And you need to, at the very least, take that human experience seriously, because the occult world, of which we are a small part of, but it's, the vastness of this community is we're pretty regularly in communication about like we have experiences. We have
Yeah.
them pretty regularly beyond grimoire work. And I think it's important I understand he's a historian, so he's not going to go with the anthropological lens, but I'm glad he cites Lerman. And because really with newer, incentives such as RAN SCP and other kinds of works that are trying to blend scholars and practitioners and kind of invite scholar practitioners to the forefront, I think it's important to note that to make a comment like this, I don't think we would necessarily as scholars go to the average Christian and say, well, what happens when your prayers aren't answered? They're never answered, are they?
Mhm.
It's like, well, you don't know that. and anyway, before I get off my, I'm holding back on a much bigger rant I want to make about the ontology of these kinds of practices. But I think there's a good pattern we can weave as scholars that don't go into pure like unbridled, I believe everything an informant says ever, and every subjective experience they have is equally meritorious. But I do think we can assume that like people went to all this effort
Yeah.
for something and they're getting something out of it. And while I'm not ashamed to say I've called spirits and heard them and they've given me excellent results. Otherwise, frankly, this would be an expensive and laborious hobby that I wouldn't otherwise need to invest this much time in if it wasn't working for me. But I do think it's important for us to note that like, I mean, give the text to a bunch of people, ask a bunch of occultists to work it, and see what they say, and you'd be surprised.
It's like to that whole point of bracketing the ontology of the spirit, there is certainly a social reality to four homies standing in the circle together conjuring.
Totally. But But yeah, there's some good analysis on the historical and intellectual context. I highly recommend folks to check out. He notes very importantly the very true observation that employing Agrippa to supplement older traditions is incredibly typical for the 16th century magician
Yeah.
kind of writers of this time period. They are citing Agrippa way more than any other author. They are necromancing Agrippa, if you will.
Mhm.
And I think Agrippa is very much a patron spirit to most of these people and to most of us. But there's also an important other way that the author is looking at older traditions, which, as ritual magic is constantly being rewritten with new orations, new techniques, and so on, there's going to be an inherent, kind of textual, chaotic nature here, as he calls it, of the tradition, and the very fragmentary nature of the manuscripts available to individual scribes. They're forced to synthesize their own magic. If they just are, because of the lack of materials always available and just how kind of chaotic these texts can be. So here, he says we don't know if the author of the Boxgrove manual had this idea of himself as a great synthesizer of magic, but nevertheless, he clearly tried to make an original synthesis. This is not just someone rewriting Agrippa. He's drawing on Agrippa and he's deeply indebted to him, but he is making his own work. So there's some interesting things to note here as well about this context, right? Klaassen says, we see that he's drawing from a heavily growing library of printed books of magic. Like, no longer do you have to be just some uh, person in the cloister being able to find these texts, right? You're able to actually have more ready access to them. And also, more and more of these books are going into Latin manuscripts and also into English. So there's this vernacularization and popularization of these texts. And then also, there's a interesting way that he's repackaging learned material for a lay audience, meaning a non-Latinate audience. This is an English text, as we said.
Yeah. It's, aptly titled. It's a manual.
Mhm.
It's a user guide. It's less, although it has instructions on how to create, it's less theoretical
Yeah.
than Agrippa's encyclopedia of all known magic in Europe at the time, or at least all literate.
Papa and Al Cummins often refer to Agrippa as the great footnoter
Yeah.
of magic. Yeah, very true. So, also, Klaassen makes some really important observations. Many of the trappings of Catholic practice are removed from the Boxgrove manual. We don't see a lot of Ave Marias or conjurations of the saints or martyrs and virgins. We don't really see the notion of having to use masses, such as my favorite, the Mass of Saint Cyprian, which comes up a few times across grimoires. The notion of having specifically a Mass of Saint Cyprian spoken over this. Al Cummins has a great article on this very practice out in Cypriana Old World. Um, and of course, we also have this uh, notion here as well that he says the Protestant numberings of the Psalms is observed, right? And while most medieval conjurations will refer to biblical stories, and the references to scripture are quite heavy in the Boxgrove manual. So again, and this may be reflecting Agrippa's emphasis on the Bible as well as his crypto Protestant sensibilities. But
My hardcore band.
your hardcore man, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Crypto Protestant and quasi ascetic.
Quasi-ascetic, yeah. My 2 genders. Yeah. So, but the translation is not simply Catholic to Protestant, nor necessarily ground between them. This is a synthesization in many ways. This is a new kind of creation that is born, a new germ, if you will. It's really a story Klaassen says about the process of privatization, right? Because, so look, like holy water. Before, before now, I'm Orthodox, so I'm still gonna get it from church.
Right.
But like here, you make it yourself, like you consecrate it. And so Klaassen makes a comment being like, the holy water continued as a resource in the Anglican tradition, and you could have easily enough gotten a bottle from church and just gone home. But nevertheless, the author of this manual gives you a way to produce your own holy water. So it's taking the consecrations of the church altar to the altar of the magician's home, right? And in which you also have the space for a circle, right? Which is another kind of altar with an altar cloth, right? So this, he's saying, is a kind of popularization, also privatization of magic. It's not like the Ciprianidos of Portugal and Spain where you're doing a lot in the church. Here it's done in your home. So again, this kind of assumes that again you're somebody who has a time for leisure and a lot of space. And certainly,
Yeah.
because those many diameter feet circles are not gonna, make themselves.
I love a grimoire that allows you to use a larger than 9-foot circle,
Yes.
because when, 3 people are in there, it can
Well, exactly. This is meant to have multiple people in there. You
Yeah.
could have multiple people. Also, one thing that Klaassen notes too is like, look, like late medieval learned practitioners of magic, like who were clerical in their own profession, like they're gonna have access to not just priests at churches, but they can do the rituals in these churches, right? They have access to them when they're not necessarily open. So the demand to get a priest to complete these tasks is a way of having what he calls sacramental monopoly in the world of medieval learned magic. And here he's saying, well, it's the casket is open, the door is blown open. Yeah.
Yeah. Your apocalyptic Christ has arrived.
Yes, yes, indeed. So let's get into the book itself. It opens with the pentacle of the apocalyptic Christ. And what a beautiful pentacle it is. You have this gorgeous, multi-concentric ringed pentacle with 4 pentagrams on either side. And it's fascinating. He reproduces the actual text that's within the inner circles. And Key, if you don't mind, could you read it for us?
I am Alpha and Omega, the first and the last, which was and which is to come. I am the first and the last, being dead and am alive, unto the end of the world. I have the keys of death and of hell. Command thy virtue, O Lord. Confirm this, O Lord. What thou hast wrought in us, let them be as dust, scattered with the wind, and the angel of the Lord drowning them. Let their way be slippery and dark, and the angel of the Lord following them.
I get goosebumps. Genuinely, like reading this. It's fantastic. And something here as well that the Hebrew is an acronym of Agla.
Hmm.
And of course, the letters stand for the 4 words in the Hebrew phrase Ata Gibor Le'olam Adonai, you, O my Lord, are mighty forever. And there's also Yehoshua, which is one of the common variations of the name of Jesus. So you have Jesus and you have God. And the image itself is straight from the 4th book of occult philosophy. And specifically, in the 4th book, it refers to this image as the most powerful of images. It's interesting too because you really have a tremendous amount of like detail in this, right? You have this long prayer. It's incredible for protection. I have made this on vellum, but I keep it, in the spirit of Boxgrove manual, which says be very secretive and be very careful who you expose your workings to. I will not share as much of my personal experiences. This episode, I usually try to, at least on some level. With this, all I'll say is make it yourself. Make it yourself, scry it, talk to the spirit, intone the phrase that's around the edges while spinning it, and read it as like concentric circles and so on. Call on different spirits that you've already contracted and made into familiars through different kinds of celestial work. If you have relationships with certain intelligences and spirits, have one of each planet bless this image, work with it. It is fascinating, and I will say it is calling it a road opener would be a little trite, but like it opens the doors and to the mind and to different spirit worlds like no other. I love this image very much. I have a spirit from a completely different tradition that is very fond of this image, and one copy of this rests with her.
Mhm.
And yeah, it's absolutely wonderful. I very much love it, and I encourage folks to definitely give it a try.
Mhm. It really is beautiful.
Mhm.
Anything that's using that much Book of Revelation is always going to get fun,
Yeah.
and it is indeed fun.
Mhm. Absolutely. So let's head on over. So we mentioned the first section of the book is really going to be these different seals, right? We start with the moon, right, and it tells us what herbs to use, and of course silver, no problem, and also mentioning like which houses we're looking at for exaltation, which directions we want to be facing, what spirit we're calling, in this case Gabriel, right, and of course the names of the intelligence and the spirit, their numbers, their characters, all drawn from Agrippa for sure. And we also have, absolutely instructions on how to make and consecrate the image. This happens for each of the 7 planets. So what's helpful here really is you have not only the full text, but you also have Klaassen's annotations, which are present in the footnotes. So one thing that was really important as well, for example, is in the Mercury section, it says Mercury hath of elements water and premix humors, of metals, sanum, of the herbs, mercurium, and here, of course, he says Mercurialis is in Agrippa, but this is Mercurialis perennis, commonly known as a dog's mercury, right? It also tells us a lot of very important information about, like, when he says five-fingered, it's a cinquefoil, we all know that, right? But when it gets into a little bit later, when we have of spices, it says frankincense, clove, cinnamon, castellinium, maces, bayberry, and mastic. This is not from Agrippa.
Mhm.
And so it's good to just know if you wanna kinda do your own digging, right? Like, his footnotes gives us a lot of information about, like, just being aware of, like, where things are coming from. But it's a f it he gives us all the seals and things, tells us what angels to make it under. So and they're all cameos, right? Which is lovely. Like, if you love cameos, we love cameos.
Yeah.
These are great to make in their actual form, right? So for example, in gold, in tin, in silver, and so on. But I love drawing cameos out on things. I have done work in these times and hours, burning these incenses with the images reflecting their rays onto things I've printed.
Yeah.
I love Google Maps. I will print things out. I will put a cameo on them. I will go to each square in each time period. I will go, 1 and then 2 and 3 and take my dear sweet time going through them.
Yeah.
And I'll specifically go to those every week, right, on that particular planetary day. So
Mhm.
suffice to say, without going
Yeah.
too much into the secrecy of it, they're great to experiment with. They're great to not just call these spirits, but they're great to, just work the cameos, put things on them.
Yeah.
Like, I know folks who love to make cameos on corkboard or on cork coasters or on cork trivets. So because they're circular, and then being able to put so much else off, pinning dolls on them,
Yeah.
pinning petitions on them, like using nails or pins slicked in different planetary oils, like literally puncture things directly into them, affixing the hands and the feet of a doll onto different parts of the cameo, or puncturing the heart through a particular number, specifically so that it aligns when you make the seal of the spirit. It's like at a particular vertex. So yeah, there's a lot you can do with these,
Yeah.
and frankly, they're all really beautiful. I just love cameos.
Yeah. They're
Um,
very pretty. I like the as well. If you ever need that planet in candle form, burning candle moving with the prayers being said into the flame, through all of the numbers in sequence,
yes,
drawing out the glyph, and then for the remainder of that candle burning, it is that planet.
yes, absolutely. It's like when we're doing an election and we're engraving gemstones or something like that, just to make like an elected talisman. With the little time I have left, because usually I have a little bit left where I can't make another talisman, but I have some time, I will quickly engrave the main seal onto some candles of an appropriate color. And like, it's not a full talisman, but if I burn it, it release something of that election in that
Yeah.
moment. Then I use it as a boost for some things for sure.
There's a greater sympathy between the rays of that planet and the rays of the flame of the candle.
Absolutely, yeah. One thing that the Boxgrove manual gives us pretty early on is a section on binding people or things, and this is done with Hagiel, our good friend from Venus. Key, if you would do us the honors.
And no many things may be done by binding and with words, as thus to cause love or hate. Secondly, that a thief shall not steal, the dogs not bark, etc. Also by touching with ointments, as to procure love or hate, sickness or health. Also by colors or ointments for the eyes, that by the radiation of the eyes, love or hatred is procured. Or by kissing, having things in the mouth. Also by characters, herbs, images, seals, with adjurations, consecrations, etc. And to procure love, use sweat, for hatred, and evil sour. Also for love, take the good intelligence of Venus, called Hagiel, whose character is this. Her table is said afore. For hatred, take her evil angel, Kedemiel, whose character is this. And thus of all other intelligences, take the evil angel of the planet, and do as it is said, mutatus mutandis, etc.
I love this sympathetic magic, right? Of Klaassen actually notes it in the footnotes, right? That this is just the importance of love magic, where you prepare an image or substance and you kiss the intended object of magic with something else in your mouth, right? So when it says having things in the mouth while you're kissing, right? Or having certain herbs and things, having the ointments or colors like makeup on your eyes, right? So that your eyes like radiate the rays of love or hatred even,
Yeah.
right? So I think a lot about like what is it to say an important name such as of Aphrodite, and I'm pronouncing her properly from now on. Actually, I just want I know it's like weird because when you speak English, it's like Aphrodite, but like Aphrodite, like when you're using the rays, right, of saying the Ferrieri, and you're
Yeah.
looking at someone, you're procuring that intensity, you're procuring that love and that seduction, right? You're essentially emanating the rays of your intention, and here it's right here, right? It's you can bind people with that. You can send that ray of light and then kind of hook it and bring that hook back into you, so you get a sense of what they're thinking and that kind of thing. And here it says, again, using the angels, as it were, the good angel and the bad angel. This is
Yeah.
the intelligence and so the spirit of Venus to specifically empower your work, right?
Yeah. I love how even steeped this entire paragraph is in the understandings of like the magic of the period. Like Klaassen has a good footnote on like the whole theory of rays with
Yeah,
Al-Kindi and that influence on Agrippa and kind of pulling in even, further Islamic ideas about how light and sight work.
yeah, yeah, and of course the whole notion of we joke about this a lot with our Godfather, which is the whole Agrippan idea of, if it smells good, it's good, and if it smells bad, it's bad.
Yeah.
Which isn't always true, actually. I mean, for some spirits, perhaps it's true, but some things that smell really bad are actually really good for you,
Yeah.
and vice versa. When it comes to magical substances. But here, you have, of course, it's a sympathetic magic. The smell aspect, the olfactory aspect, is specifically based on, is it pleasing?
Also the yeah, sweet and sour.
Hmm.
Going back, just very classic sympathy all around.
Hmm. Totally. So next up, we have instructions on how to make lamens or pentacles to call good spirits, which is lovely. It tells about new moon on the day and hour of the planet. You want the being in the house of the exaltation, or in a place a plate of for square, or in the colors appropriate of the planet and written parchment. So, for example, to call the Venusian intelligence called Hegiel, whose character is as follows: her table in ciphers is placed in the midst of the heptagram. And at the hour of making, let Venus be in Taurus, Libra, or Pisces. And of course, you have then the names, the divine names of the god, corresponds to intelligence, written around the four pentagrams with the four corners. And then you add Anael, you add the angel ruling Friday, right? Then you put Anael's seal. All of this is from Agrippa, right? And then we also finally have even the planetary seal generated from the Kamiya. And then, of course, you also have the intelligence and the spirit names. And then once you've done all of this, you have this table to call Hagiel, as well as a whole list of spirits that precedes. So what's interesting here specifically is, as it says, the name itself is drawn from the Heptameron, and the scribe writes the name Varkan, the ruling angel of air on Sunday, according to Heptameron, incorrectly. And then in the following table, the scribe also follows the Basel edition, which writes Babiel in place of Rabiel, which is found in most other traditions. And here we have also the scribe copies Agosita right on Agosia, and a few other things. So check out always the footnotes for possible corrections, because this is being copied from a different book.
Yeah. Also, make your own copy of this book because they certainly get creative with their spelling and orthography choices.
Well, this is more typical of the
Oh,
time. Yeah.
absolutely! It's situated in the period.
Yeah, yeah.
As a magician of these times and use of this language.
Yeah. But at the end, you get this gorgeous example of what they're talking about. You can see why the
Yeah.
pentacles are constantly being referred to, like there's all these I should say pentagrams, excuse me. You can see how it's with the kamiya is positioned inside the hexagram with like a pentagram at every point. You can see again Anael, Varkan, for example. You have Hagiel in the Hebrew. You have the actual seals themselves, and it's a beautiful Venusian circle. Really, is what
Yeah.
you've made. And this is the first table, and of course you can customize this for each and every planet. There's a lamen that's given for the angel Hagiel with, again, very very Kamiya heavy, right? You have it's the pentacle or the hexagram of defense, which is really beautiful as well.
Yeah.
This one is it literally has with in addition to the agla, it says "Amen, so be it," is written atop in red ink, and it's set later by a contemporary hand, which is interesting. But the actual figure is from the Heptameron.
Yeah.
And the instructions are pretty much the same well, it strips out some of the Roman Catholic elements, such as the priestly garments and the Mass of the Holy Spirit. And because in the Heptameron, it specifically tells us, let it be a priest's garment if it can be, but if it cannot be had, let it be linen and clean. Then take this pentacle made in the day and hour of Mercury, the moon increasing, and the parchment made of kid's skin. But first, let there be set over it a Mass of the Holy Ghost and sprinkled with the water of baptism. So that part is omitted here when you're making this particular hexagram defense.
Yeah.
But it does say make this, in the day and hour of Mercury with the moon increasing, virgin parchment, kid skin, consecrate and anoint and perfume it, and so on, and it says let Mercury be in Virgo or Gemini.
I love that figure specifically.
Mm-hmm.
One that is just useful broadly.
Mm.
Experience wise, speaking, shoehorning a description into the Boxgrove manual. Shit rules. It's good for pretty much any spirit that it's set to. So
well, check out these other Hagiol possibilities, right? There's another table here. There's a third table. You have a fourth table, and they have slightly different instructions. My favorite is the fourth table because you have the seals and these vertexes, basically, right? And you have the Anel seal in the middle, in one of the concentric circles. You have the actual seal of Venus itself in there. You have all the names, right? And then you just have this kind of way that the angel Hagiel is just like the four corners of the world, like where you might, like in other practices, have the four evangelists. You just have Hagiel, which to me is so like beautiful. Like you're basically saying like this is a little microcosm that exists for the spirit. And it's the fourth table of the Hagiel, the intelligence of Venus. He says you take that which shall look the best, but note that Venus must be in Taurus, Libra, or Pisces. The moon must be increasing in the hour of Venus, made in silver or virgin parchment, consecrated, sprinkled, anointed, and perfumed. To answer the grimoire's question, that's my favorite. That one.
yeah. It is really beautiful. I love the strategy of just layer correspondence. Like
Yeah.
each of these is just corresponding sacred geometry, as it
Mhm.
were, of like, pentagram, hexagram, circle type figures with divine names of the radiance of that sphere, spirit seals of that sphere, numbers of that sphere, coming out of that sphere.
I mean, that's how people do folk magic with these things
Yep.
to this day, right? And
Exactly, yeah.
because the pentacles work on their own, you don't necessarily have to boost them all that
Yep.
much, but like it's more in their proper storage and use, really. But like, yeah, I love this, and
Yep.
it's fun. And for the enthusiast who's maybe looked at Balthasar Black's work or who's looked at Delamine Ra's work and they're interested in that kind of blending of folk magic and the kind of root work type elements with Solomonic work, this grimoire is full of things that would just work so well with that. You make this on parchment and you burn like candles in each of those stars. Shit will show up. It will be intense.
Yeah.
I will just speaking from personal experience.
Yeah.
And then we get into some infernal spirits, such as there's Astaroth, Abaddon, and so on, Beelzebub. There's a good common circle to call Baron,
Baron.
Baron, or any particular spirit. Okay. you know, thinking about stupid like AI Trump Baron, my boy, my son, it's over.
Baron, come here to be my son. I have been defeated. We have been defeated, my sweet child.
You gonna put that in there?
Yeah. Put that one in.
That is a good circle to call Baron.
Baron,
I'm sorry.
Put a ball in that boy's hand in the circle.
He is. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Trump, but that boy is Slovenian and incredibly tall. He needs to be hooping. Put a ball in his hand.
We are 20 years away from him in a political career ordering nuclear tests in the Seychelles. So we need a fucking ball in his hand to
Get
change
us.
the timeline.
Get him into basketball right now. Baron.
Baron.
Anyway,
Take this. Baron.
we're serious people.
Baron's a cool spirit, though.
Yes.
Appears notably in every other fun manuscript drawing on, Agrippa in England.
Mhm.
He's in Folger, if I remember correctly, in Book of Oberon.
Yeah.
As it's now published.
Yeah. Totally.
Good guy.
Mm-hmm.
Watch out for his sword.
Oh,
Just saying.
I know. I know to watch out for a sword.
Yeah.
Borrow.
For the listener, watch out for
Yeah, what? Borrowed. Sorry. Okay.
It's pure echolily at this point. Anytime you say it, just
God, this is the we can't do a single like pentacle episode without there being like a nasty equivalent.
yeah.
Then we have the divine names of God, based, of course, on the manuscript books, as it were, lovingly named. And then you also have the divine names of God by Cornelius Agrippa. And now we get into the consecrations, and these are long. Okay, here a short one is the consecration of fumigation, which bless this creature of spices. By the way, I love that. I love a
Yeah.
creature of spice. It's giving Dune. it's giving Baron Harkonnen.
My sweet child.
Yeah. But the creature of, as Klaassen rightly points out, this is directly from the consecration of salt from standard Catholic liturgy. So if you've seen like the bless this creature of salt, bless this creature of water, that's full on specifically Catholic liturgy. And not something that easy to remove from
Right.
the grimoire session. We have a consecration of water, consecration of oil, which is very long, consecration of fire. Then you get one of my favorite parts actually of the consecration of fire is it calls directly to the God speaking to Moses in the burning bush, and the pillar of fire that leads the Israelites in Exodus 3:20-22. So it's a lovely verbiage here that I'm quite fond of. Actually, Key, maybe you'd like to read it out loud for us.
I exercise the you creature of fire, and by him which made all things that were made, that forthwith you mayest cast away all fantasies or illusions, whereby you mayest not hurt in anything. And, O sweet Saviour Jesus Christ, which hast created fire to be the instrument of thy justice, to the punishment of wicked sinners, and for the judgment of the universal world, as also you which didst appear to Moses in a bush of flaming fire, in which you didst go before the children of Israel in a fiery pillar, and you which didst appoint inextinguishable fire to be preserved in the tabernacle of witness, and being aught didst miraculously kindle it again, and didst preserve it purely under the water unquenchable. For these and all other thy miracles wrought by fire, and also for that you aren't a consuming fire, and in thy holy Bible called Splendor, Die Lux Dei Lumen Dei, bless, O Lord, this creature of fire, that it may be sanctified and blessed to the praise of thy holy name, and that it may not be hurtful to the bearer thereof, or the seers thereof, through our Lord Jesus Christ, which liveth and reigneth world without end. This fire must be put into a new earthenware pot.
I love that it ends with literally just an instruction.
Yeah.
After all of the consecration. So listeners may have noticed that it says not to harm the seer.
Yeah.
And again, this is why the circles are so big, because the assumption is there is going to be a seer. Like there's a few notes like this that I really am fond of saying, because it basically says like, yeah, you'll be doing all the conjuration, but someone else is going to be doing the scrying.
Yeah. And even going back to that kind of, I'm avoiding so badly saying the indexality of the rays, but this entire idea that, here's the basis for consecrating candles outside of elections is, any viewer of these things can still potentially be harmed by the rays.
Mm. Yeah. And to not get harmed by no rays, we have a consecration of the sword. Then you also have a consecration of the book or parchment itself, which this is the longest one. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 long ass prayers. We're not gonna read them. You can read them. You can see that each prayer is going to be just adding a new layer of consecration and protection to your Liber Spiritum. You'd also then have instructions for consecrating the book itself. So it says you should abstain from Venus 9 days. Eat little meat, no sexy times. Eat a little meat, and therefore Lent is best. Do a Lent fast, and every day say these 9 prayers to consecrate the book. Over the book, wrapped up in fine, linen, sprinkling with holy water, anointing with perfume, desiring, God of His mercy to consecrate it, and say the Psalms 51, 56, and 57. and lay it upon a clean table, covered in white linen, kneeling down, say the 9 prayers, right? Said as before, 9 days every day, that in the morning, noon, and evening, the face turned towards the east, at the least failing not morning and evening. So it's a pretty rigorous curriculum of prayer.
Mhm. It's also great that it includes that practical consideration where it's like, don't consider it fucked up if you miss the midday one,
Mhm.
but try to do the midday one.
Yeah.
Always helpful.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely that's one of the things that I think this book evidences is that the author did this work.
Yes.
Like it's to me, it's clear that, and I love to necromance the spirits that write books. Like I do a lot with Saint Cyprian specifically. Is like if it's an anonymous author, I'll be like, bring me some trace of him.
Mm.
Let me hear him. Let me feel him a little bit. I want to talk, or at least manifest some portion of that spirit. And then there is, the method of actually working this, praying to God throughout, being clean, right? White shirt, clean clothes, body and face washed, long hair cut, nails pared, feet and hands both, okay, make sure they're trimmed, and don't lie with any woman. And then again, the place must be clean. Nature should be definitely in tune with the planets, right? So if it says to procure love, you're going to want to do it on Venus in a garden or a chamber, right? Better yet, if Venus is in Taurus, Libra, or Pisces, and, either for calling Venusian angels or calling her intelligence, Hagiel. And I love this notion that you could be in a garden or a chamber, right? To me, like the setting of where you're calling these spirits has to matter, right? A lot of us dress up for different spirits, right? It's one thing to be in clean linen robes, but like maybe you want to be in something beautiful for Venus. Maybe you want to be in something authoritative, for Jupiter, or something very ascetic for Saturn, and so on and so forth, right? Very humble.
I always love the kind of like the Greco-Roman influence of like if you're doing heavy Saturnian stuff, be in like dirty, torn clothing, like wander through a graveyard beforehand.
Yeah. There's also a section on how to make pentacles by Holy Scripture. And this is really fun because you essentially see that in the first example of the Apocalyptic Christ. And it even speaks of Revelation clearly in the first example. So, and in this one of how to make pentacles, literally, it says, this is the illustration above. This is the famous Apocalyptic Christ. And the instructions themselves are drawn from the 4th book of occult philosophy. But it's interesting that and again, even the image within the center of the pentacle appears in the 4th book. But to me, what strikes me about these instructions is that it basically tells you how the author made that pentacle, like that Apocalyptic Christ one. It's drawn from the 4th book, but here's the method by which he did it. So there's a triple circle, right? There's you put God sitting on his throne, you have the sharp sword in his mouth, picture in the New Testament, right? The Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, that which was, and which is to come, the first and the last, being dead and alive, etc., etc. You have the various names of God, El, Elohim, Elohe, Sabaoth, Elion, Asherie, Adonai, Ei, Shaddai, Tetragrammaton, etc. And so there's some notes as well. There's some rules for operating. You do want a consecrated ring, a scepter, sword, book, pentacle, be a godly, learned, devout man. Here again, it speaks very much of the gender of the operator. And, observe the times and the hours as well as by night, specifically the age of the moon. She should be in the new, even number after her change. So the 2nd, 4th, 6th, 8th, 10th, 12th, or 14th days are specifically given. And this advice is from the Thesaurus Spiritum, that the magician should begin working every even day after the new moon to the middle of the lunar month or the full moon, after which point the moon will wane again. So it's good that it also gives us some clues as to, or explicit instructions rather, on which days to work. And the rules at this point for the ring and the consecration are more or less, Klaassen says, the same as the one found in the Thesaurus Spiritum, especially in the same order, right? So we're looking at various different folios, Sloan 3853, the Welcome Library, Welcome 110, and so on and so forth, the kind of classic ones. But specifically when we get to this instruction of, not defiling yourself with women.
Don't do it, little girl.
No, do it.
Nor should you have excess meat. Don't do it.
Don't do it, little girl. All right, or drink. Our patrons have infected us with luscious massacre recently, and so the tulpa is very alive in our brains. But it says, don't reveal the creature unless it to be your sworn friend. And Klaassen says here, this instruction doesn't actually appear in Sloane 3853 or Welcome 110 Latin versions of the Thesaurus Spiritum, but something like it appears on a badly damaged first page of an English epitome of the Thesaurus Spiritum. And what's interesting here is it kind of gives us a hint as to which manuscripts the author was working with, right? But these sworn friends are very much your magical allies. This is your coven, this is your guild of wizards, a brotherhood, right, that you swear to secrecy, as Klaassen says. So we have a lot of instructions about making the circle. It says 15 or 17 feet. It's a lot. Names of God, around the edges and so on and so forth. Usual stuff. You can read the book yourselves, but it's good to know that it gives you a lot of practical instructions, what not to do in different planetary hours, how to kind of deal with changes in the planetary hours, what happens when different actual planetary configurations are happening, and so on and so forth, right? There's a lot of consideration here, as well as some thoughts on what happens when it finishes, right? It says it's wise to keep well thy circle and go not away, in the departure, but stay some time in prayer afterwards, because many times it says that, these spirits may appear privately out of thy sight. And though they appear not yet going out of the circle without giving license, as said before, right? So it's here also speaks again of being patient, repeating yourself, being not so hasty to pack up and finish, but really spending some time to see what's manifesting around the edges and so on. And I always love a practical consideration like that. This tells me this was work, that this was lovingly worked. And the notion of repeat attempts, the notion of being careful of how spirits may manifest and so on. And of course, Key, we got your friend again.
Yeah, we return to Baron.
Baron!
Come here to be my son.
There's a common figure for any one spirit, Baron or another. And we end off with something really fun, which is the figures for the days of the week in each season. So this is, for example, the figure of Sunday in spring, and then Sunday in summer, Sunday in the harvest or autumn, and Sunday in winter. And this proceeds as well for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So you get to customize very Heptameron-like, but you get to kind of customize based on the day. But here it's also based on the season.
Shoutouts to the classic Varkon Rex, the Homa Yain. Yes.
Not the homie. Well, I was gonna say, each of the circles is customized to the 3 zodiac signs that rule each season. And so here, of course, we have Aries, Taurus, and Gemini for the spring. We have Cancer, Leo, and a Virgo for the summer. And it, proceeds, right? Libra, Scorpio, Sagittarius, Capricorn, Aquarius, and Pisces. So it's great that it considers that, right? And of course you have the different symbols actually repeated depending on the day that is ruled by that particular planet. So again, read this text yourself, play around with it. The annotations are fantastic. Klaassen, as always, does an excellent job. And there's also a really great appendix of the actual sources used. So you get to go from every item, specifically for example, number 1 is the Sigil of the Apocalyptic Christ, right? It tells us Liber Quartus, which is the 4th book of occult philosophy. And then later on, it says the names of evil spirits, for example. It even tells you the folios, right? If it's the divine names according to Agrippa, that's from Heptameron, right? The consecration of the suffumigations, and the water, oil, fire, is back and forth between Liber 4, Quartus, and Heptameron. And you get to also see the actual sources for the colors, the places, the planets, the herbs, when the herbs disagree with each other, the seals, the figures, and of course, we love a good planetary hour calendar. So it's a lovely text. I've played around with this, but in the spirit of the book, I shan't speak too much on exactly how, but it's not hard to put together, actually. With a little bit of patience and a lot more availability of materials than, frankly, the author ever had. We're living in a real time of you can just get straight up anything off the internet. You can really play around with these. Thankfully, as well, if you struggle with some of the Old English, as it were, Klaassen does provide a bit of an editorial note before the manuscript begins, where he explains his own editorial choices.
Love it.
Mm-hmm.
Such a fun manuscript. It's very usable, very, very plug and play.
And encourages experimentation. It encourages finding out for yourself, right? All of this is footwork for when the spirit comes. And then when the spirit comes, you talk to them. And so I think nowadays most magicians are very into drawing spirits in the crystals. Like their Trithemius is their boy when it comes to wanting to call angels. But I will say I've had stronger manifestations with this. I believe that's not necessarily because this text is more valuable. For me it's more because it required more of me. Like I think that the fasts, the space that you give yourself, the extra consideration of fumigations and things, like these are all drawn from the same sources. But specifically, it was just the extra care put into creating an environment for the angel to show up, the visual in the shoe stone, or when I've done it, just as playing both the role of the conjurer and the seer at the same time. The communication was clear, it was louder, it was intense.
Mm-hmm.
So I've had a lot of fun with this. Folks, if you give it a shot, please do message us. Let us know how things are going. And if you play around with this text and you feel comfortable just giving a shout out, we won't parse you for details because unless we are of course in the same brotherhood. But yeah, it's let us know at least just so we know that we're out there. I've had more people excitedly text me like, yes, I'm doing 2 webinars, and yes, it worked, and yes, spirits showed up, and is it just me, or are those demons basically, censored? And I'm like, yes, they are. They also show up to me in the same way, and we have a great time.
Beautiful. Well, thank you for putting this one together.
Yeah, of course, it's easy peasy. Again, check it out for treasure hunting. Check out the actual other text that's in the book as well, and let us again keep us posted on your work. All right. Well, easy peasy, a little short and sweet, but definitely lots of fun. And in the spirit of the Apocalyptic Christ, which where my Book of Revelations girls at, where my homies who love a good apocalypse, I have the song Apocalypse by Cigarettes After Sex for the Akashic record, but don't be having no cigarettes and don't even be having sex if you're trying to call these spirits. Abstain from the Venus, if you will.
Take that cigarette and put it into the fumigation of art.
Yeah, from Mars specifically.
Yes.
He loves tobacco. Mars doesn't meeting the planets. Mars doesn't want to meet your ass.
You'll meet Mars when you least expect.
Unfortunately, yeah. Not the accidents. No. We have only the finest protective amulets on our cars.
Yeah, we have one for each season.
Yes, exactly. Actually, 4-wheel drive. Let's do I'm serious. Let's do a protection charm for your car that we swap out depending on the season.
Love it.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Okay, well, let's brainstorm that after we sign off.
Yeah. Also, pro tip: if you're going to be making these as circles, you can do it to have Velcro.
Yes.
Yes.
Velcro the names on and off.
Yeah.
For the Heptameron girlies out there, you know this trick.
Cool Heptameron facts.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love it. And my Akashic record for today is Purple Hat by Sophie Tucker.
Why?
So we're hanging off guardrails, we're hanging off people. We're hanging off people.
Yeah. That's what it feels like when all the angels come at the same time.
Exactly. Yeah. It's Apocalyptic Christ.
Yeah.
Down.
Oh no. I remember our Akashic Records playlist is available on Spotify and linked on withcunningendcommand.com/podcast.
Woo.
And the license to depart for this episode, out of the 9 prayers to consecrate your Liber Spiritum, in which you'll be putting down all the fun things you learned from the spirits, it is prayer 8. Why? Because I like that, and it's not going to kill Key's voice to do.
In the name of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, the Holy Trinity in inseparable unity, I call upon you that thou mayest be my health and defense and protection of my soul, now and forever, by the virtue and power of thy holy cross. I desire thee, O Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of the living God, and by the merits and intercessions of our Blessed Virgin Mary, thy Mother, in the name of all thy saints, that you wouldest give me thy grace and divine power against all naughty spirits, that wheresoever I shall call them, and by whatever virtue I have the holy names, that forthwith they may come from every part of the world and fulfill the will of the exerciser, neither hurting nor fearing any creature, but rather obedient and ministering, and by the divine virtue may fulfill my commandment, and so be it. Amen.
And the license to depart for this episode didn't fucking paste the document. Hold on.